Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Celine, and today it is a very gloomy, stormy day in England, which means that it's the perfect time to get comfortable, get cozy, and talk a little bit about books. I say talk a little bit about books. I may have gone slightly overboard with buying books, so I have a giant stack of books, most of them classics, pretty much almost all of them, a little bit of modern classics mixed in there, a little bit of non-fiction to spice things up. But I have a giant stack, so I'm going to have to be quick and try not to keep you here all day. Let's start with the book that I think is the oldest one on this pile, and that is the Iliad by Emily Wilson, or translated by Emily Wilson, is written by Homer, or the person that we call Homer. Authorship of ancient classics, it can sometimes be a bit complicated and difficult. But I already own, let me show you, the Odyssey by Emily Wilson, the translation, and I really like this edition. I haven't read it yet, but I thought if I get the Iliad, then I have a matching set. I have heard really great things about Emily Wilson's translation, and this edition is quite nice, like the spacing of the text and stuff. It looks like a pleasant edition to read, so even though I think I have read bits and pieces of the Iliad, I would like to read the whole thing, enjoy it as the full story, and I think this will be the right way to tackle it. Next up, a book that I got secondhand, and this isn't really a book that I know anything about. This is Daphnis and Chloe by Longus, which is supposedly an ancient Greek novel. Unfortunately, the back of this copy isn't very informative. It doesn't even mention what period it's from. It does say that Goethe really recommends me reading this, so I guess I'll just follow his advice and read this novel, play, whatever it is. Staying with the ancients, I also have this one by, is it Marshall? Or do English people pronounce this differently? I'm not entirely sure. In any case, I do know that it's a Latin poet who, the back tells me, lived in the 1st century of Rome. And what's quite cool about this edition is that it contains both the English text as well as the Latin text. And as I have made a video about fairly recently, I'm currently reading Latin, and this type of book is really excellent because it means that I can read the text, but I can also dabble a little bit in the Latin at the same time. This isn't a book that I'm just going to read cover to cover anytime soon. I think the poems are really short. You can get a bit of an impression from the page layout. So I will just dabble in this a little bit. Speaking of Latin, we're going to segue into the medieval period with reading Medieval Latin, which was written by Keith Sidwell. This is a sequel to the Reading Latin series, so I also have the original books, which teaches you Latin basically in a slowly graded way. This one is a follow-up on that series, so if you want to know more about medieval Latin, this is basically like a graded reader type situation where you come to grips with some of the changes that happened to the Latin language during the medieval period. I'm not really at the point yet where I'm ready for this book, but because I'm quite interested in the topic, and I saw it for a really good price secondhand. I think I paid £8 for this book, so I thought, you know what, I'll just buy it for future Celine. Speaking of the Middle Ages, I also got the Norton Anthology of English Literature, and I got the Middle Ages 10th edition book. I got this one really cheaply at a secondhand shop. I think I paid £2 on it. The sticker's still on it. It was £2. And the main reason I got this is because it's got a full text of Beowulf in it. I would very much like to read Beowulf. It's one of those texts that, you know, feels really exciting, but I haven't really had a chance yet to dive into it. So I'm quite happy to have this edition. There's also tons of other stuff in it, but I'm not sure how much of that I'm really going to read. I did basically just buy this for Beowulf, but for £2 I feel like that's fair enough. During that same charity shop visit, I also got the 12th and 13th centuries by Barbara Harvey, which is part of the Short Oxford History of the British Isles. This is a scholarly book, and in it there are lots of different chapters, and they all look at different just aspects of society during the 12th and 13th century. So one chapter might talk about the economics, one might talk about war and conquest, that sort of thing. I'm not sure I'm going to read this cover to cover. There might be some topics that I'm slightly less interested in. I know this is such a hot take. I'm not super interested in battles, which I know is one of the primary appeals for a lot of people in history, but battles don't really interest me. But other things do, like daily life, I'm actually weirdly fascinated by. So things like that I will probably just pick and choose in this book to learn a bit more about the topics that I find interesting. Moving onwards into the 18th century, I also got 2 biographies. The first biography I got is Marie Antoinette's The Journey by Antonia Fraser, which is a very chunky biography. I do know how Marie Antoinette's life ends, but I don't actually know anything about any of the stuff that happened leading up to it. Considering the length of this book, she must have had quite an eventful life, because otherwise there wouldn't have been this much to write about. I thought this book would be a good one to include in my Women in History project, where I just try to learn more about women in history, and Marie Antoinette is one of those people that I think most people know, but we don't really know that much about her life. So I look forward to Antonia Fraser telling me much more. And then I have the biography of biographies, the longest book in my collection, like the longest single book in my collection, and that is The Life of Johnson by James Boswell. This chonker clocks in at 1492 pages, which quite frankly is a little bit too much. And the paper in this edition is like a little bit like that Bible paper. It's like really thin just to make it possible to publish it in one volume. I might be really silly for getting the unabridged version. You can also just get abridged versions, which are just a friendly 300 or 400 pages. But I feel like if I'm going to do the biography of biographies, if I'm going to tackle The Life of Johnson, the book that all the scholars are really excited about, then I feel like I should read the original rather than just extracts, basically. Because considering how long it is, when you have an abridgment of like 300 or 400 pages, that means that they've cut out like 3/4 of the entire book. So, you know, I feel like I can do this. Let me know in the comments whether you think I can do this. I also still had a gift card, so I went to the bookshop and I got myself A Vindication of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft. I recently finished Romantic Outlaws, which is a biography both of Mary Wollstonecraft as well as her daughter, Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. And it was a fantastic book. I look forward to making a video specifically about that book, but I will pop in here and say that is definitely the best non-fiction book that I've read this year so far, possibly in even longer. It was really good. And it really creates more interest in Mary Wollstonecraft for me. And having read the biography, I became really curious about A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. So I picked this one up. I'm not quite halfway, but I've made a good chunk of progress. And I've been having a very good time with it. Next up, I got 2 books by Sir Walter Scott. So I've got Kenilworth and The Heart of Midlothian in these 2 really lovely old school editions. I'm not really sure how old these editions are. I mean, they smell and look and feel quite old, but they're in great condition, and I bought them both for £4, so I feel like I got a great deal on these 2. I don't really know that much about these 2 books. I expect it's historical fiction considering it's Sir Walter Scott. Regardless, I look forward to diving into both of these. Then I made a little bit of an impulse buy. You know, I was in the charity shop. I can't resist a good deal. So I got several books. I think it's 5. Yes, 5. Of Thomas Hardy in these beautiful leather-bound editions. They were only £3 each and they looked so good. The books that I got are Hand of Ethelberta, The Woodlanders, The Mayor of Casterbridge, The Return of the Native, and The Trumpet Major. Here they all are in their shiny glory. The only issue is that I don't really know whether I'm even going to like Thomas Hardy, but I thought if I don't, then I can just sell these. And considering I only paid £3 per book, that shouldn't really be that much of an issue. But do let me know which one you think I should start with. Let me know if there are any that you think I will enjoy, or maybe that I won't enjoy. That's absolutely fine as well. But yeah, a little bit of an impulse buy, that one. Less of an impulse buy is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. A little while ago I read something else by Melville. I think it was called Bartleby the Scrivener, which is just a little novella, but I really enjoyed it and I really enjoyed his writing style. So I feel a little bit more prepared to tackle the book about the whale, considering its length, which is admittedly quite intimidating. I think I'm going to include this one in a project that I will talk about more sometime soon, which will be based on reading some of the massive books that I own. Unfortunately, not every book that I buy is really long, so I also got Confessions of an English Opium Eater by Thomas de Quincey, which is this very friendly, small little paperback. This is de Quincey's memoir about his laudanum use, which is a very strong opiate that was unfortunately used quite extensively during the Victorian era and as well in the 18th century. As we know, opiates are really, really addictive, and there were quite a lot of people that struggled with opium addictions in this era, and I'm quite interested in finding out what de Quincey has to say about opium, about his experiences with it. I think I've heard that there are some really weird dream sequences in this, which that sounds quite interesting, so we'll see. I also got The Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner by James Hogg, which I honestly don't really know that much about. The only thing I remember is that it's a narrative apparently split in two. So there's a narrative, and then down the middle there's like a sudden shift in point of view, and I've heard from people that they don't really enjoy that. I will be somewhat prepared for that. I don't know whether that's going to help or not. But apparently this is one of those books that was very upsetting to people when it was published, but then again, it was published in 1824, and to be fair, people were very easily upset in 1824, but I look forward to finding out why it was so scandalous at this time. Next up is a book that I had never heard of and didn't know anything about, but that I basically just bought because it was cheap and it looked nice. This is A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr, and as you can see, I have already read it. So this is about a main character who, after the First World War, sort of finds refuge in this really small little town. And while he's there, he's renovating a painting in a church. And it's quite a quiet little novella. But I'll talk about it in more detail and share my thoughts about it sometime soon. And then finally, I have two books that I actually just bought to add them to my collection. They're both books that I have already read. But I would like to make sure that the books that I enjoyed are actually part of my collection. The first book is a book that I actually used to own, but I let a friend borrow it, and that was 7 years ago. I have the feeling I'm not getting this one back, which is absolutely fine. It's not an issue, but I did get myself a new secondhand copy for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But is it Ken Kesey or Ken Kesey? Unfortunately, I ordered this one on the internet, but the book is kind of, I'm not sure if you will be able to see, but the book is kind of stained and just overall not very nice. I guess that's the hazard of buying secondhand books online. As I think most people know, this is about a mental hospital. And I remember finding this book quite enjoyable despite the quite difficult content, but it's one that I would really like to reread just to see how I feel about it now. So now I'll be able to do that with this pretty disgusting copy. And I also got myself a copy of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is a lovely little literary horror novel that really unsettles you. The story of the book doesn't really bear that much resemblance to the Netflix show, even though I do think the Netflix show is actually really good. It's just a different piece of art. But this is a book that I think I might want to reread around Halloween time, because I really like the idea of like unsettling houses and weird spaces, so I think this is going to be a great reread for me. So those were all of the books that I bought recently. I may have gone a little bit overboard, I do have to admit. It was a lot, but thank you for sticking with me through it all. Let me know if you saw any books that you think I should prioritize, or if you want to share your thoughts about anything that I got, do let me know as well. I hope to see you again soon in some other video. Bye!